Are you?
I'm Sam.
And this is Gabe.
And this is Coaster Wars.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Coasters Wars podcast. Today we're taking a special turn into everything B&M.
That's right, everybody. We're on to our second Coasters 101 episode. And with our next normal Coaster Wars episode coming out, we thought it would be fitting to dive into what B&M is, what the company is all about, and what kind of coasters they build.
Yeah, B&M is a very special company. It's one of those companies, I think it doesn't get enough love. I think, obviously, people have their issues with what they do, but they've been around for a long time, and they know what they're doing in the coaster world. And I just don't think they get the credit they deserve sometimes. And that's kind of why we wanted to do a special episode just on them and talk about what they are as a roller coaster manufacturer. Also, now that if we say, oh, that coaster's a B&M, well, at least you'll know at least some of what we're talking about. So
Exactly. Yeah. So when we get into this, B&M stands for, and I apologize if I'm going to butcher this, but I believe it's Bolliger and Mabillard. It is a Switzerland-based company, and it is named after the president and vice president, Walter Bolliger and Claude Mabillard. And they were established in 1988. They built their first coaster in 1990 and really made a name for themselves in 1992 with the building of Batman, which was the first inverted coaster.
Yeah, it's definitely Batman's definitely a good ride. I don't know exactly how you were planning to structure this whole episode, but
I didn't really know either. So I was just like, that was a little very basic introduction. I can get a little bit more into their history if you want to talk about their rides later in the episode.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the cool thing about the Iron Wolf, the very first coasters, you've actually experienced that.
I have. So to get into the history and how this company all started, Bolliger and Mabillard were two guys that actually worked for a company called Giovanola, I think is how you pronounce it. They didn't build too many coasters, but they were actually known for subcontracting. And so basically what happened was that company came under new management, and these two guys were like, we don't want to deal with that. We're going to start our own company. And so when they first started, they only had 4 draftsmen under the payroll, I guess. And what happened was when they were still working with Giovanola, they subcontracted an intimate, what is called a bobsled coaster at Six Flags
yes.
here in America.
So if anybody remembers way back when, it was a coaster called Z-Force.
Yep.
And it was one of the worst coasters of all time. It was actually a traveling coaster. It spent time at multiple different parks, but it did make a pit stop at Six Flags Great America. So I think it was something else though. I don't think it was Z-Force. I think the last stop is when they called it Z-Force. But basically, when you looked at this coaster, it had the same exact track as what a traditional B&M nowadays has. Okay, and that's why some people get kind of confused on who actually made that coaster and stuff. But it is technically not a B&M, but it looks like a B&M, but it was not a great coaster at all. In fact, it was really rough.
Basically, it was not a good coaster. And in 1988, the at-time staffing engineer at Six Flags Great America, one second, I have his name. And of course, I can't find it in my notes. But basically, the staffing engineer at Six Flags Great America reached out to these two guys because he worked with them when they came in with Giovanola to build this ride for Intimate. And he wanted them to reconfigure the cars for the ride. And so he asked them to do that in 1988. And then it's actually funny because when they originally started B&M, they were not going to build amusement rides. And then this guy reached out to have them configure the cars on the bobsled roller coaster. And then he was like, hey, why don't you guys design me a ride? And so they designed the stand-up coaster Iron Wolf. It opened in 1990. And if anyone has listened to our episode on that, it is actually part of mine and Gabe's worst credits.
Do you know what number episode that is?
I don't off the top of my head. It was fairly
after one of our newer ones, yeah.
Well, I was gonna say it was fairly soon after our top 15, so it's probably like 16, 17, 18.
It might actually be episode 16 because I think we did the Battle of the Champions for 15.
Yeah.
And then episode 16 was Battle for Last Place, which would have been that episode.
I think you are right. So
little throwback to a previous episode there.
Yes. So another thing too, because one of the really big signature things when it comes to B&Ms is also their track style. It's very signature. I feel like and we say this about a lot of rides actually. If you look at the track, you can generally tell what company built it. And so in the building of Iron Wolf, they did not have a steel company to build their roller coasters for them. So they went to a company that they previously worked for with Gio Vanola. And it is
Gio Nova. Are you saying that right? I don't know if you're saying that right.
It's Giovanola. So Gio Vanola is how I'm pronouncing it.
I didn't think there was L's in there. I guess there is. Okay, I was wrong. Okay.
I'll
stop talking.
So anyways, when they went to go build this ride, they had their design. So the two guys went to a steel company that they previously worked with. It's called Claremont Steel Fabricators, and partner with them for this one ride. And then that just led to a legacy. And now any ride built by B&M in North America, that steel comes from Claremont Steel Fabricators. They do all of the steel work for all of the North America rides for B&M. And the rest is kind of history. What really put B&M on the map, though, was the building of the Batman ride. Batman the original at Six Flags Great America.
Here's the one point I do want to make, and this frustrates me when a lot of people talk about B&M, is the hallmark insult that people say to B&M is that they're not innovative and they're not creative. But their very first roller coaster was a stand-up coaster, which had been done in the past, but not very well.
Yes.
And I feel like for their first coaster, it wasn't a bad attempt. Obviously, it got rough over the years, and when you experienced it, it was rougher. But
yes.
But then their second major coaster was an inverted coaster that had never been seen before, basically anywhere.
Yes.
You can't tell me that's not innovative. You know what I'm saying? And it's
Absolutely.
not creative, and it's not something different. So I know in today's day and age, they might not be as creative or innovative as an Intamin or an RMC, but when they started out, they really were trying different things and trying to get themselves on the map. And there's a lot of things that the B&M has done that really pushed the roller coaster world ahead. And so to say that they're not innovative, I think it's just an incorrect statement. I just kind of wanted to put that there.
No, I 100% agree. Early B&M really was one of the forerunners when it came to roller coaster engineering, and the Batman the Ride is a perfect example of that. It was the first inverted coaster ever built. And if people don't know what that means, and Gabe can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically coasters before this, you sat on top of the track. Inverted, you hang down below, right?
Yeah, it's a common misconception, too, because everybody says, oh, well, Aero did it first. No, so Aero did what was called a suspended coaster. Basically, It was a small catch car that ran on an inverted track that then hanged down into the car. And the reason that's different is because it still uses – it's not the same thing as what an inverted coaster is, where the train is actually – like the seats and the cars are physically attached to the track. It's a different experience. The other thing is those Aero suspended coasters had no inversions, where obviously like the hallmark of an inverted B&M is inversions. So,
yes.
But yeah, it's basically you're underneath the track instead of the track being underneath you. That's the easiest way to point out an inverted coaster to someone.
Yes. So the popularity of the Batman ride, the first inverted coaster, really let B&M take off. I mean, this ride alone has 7 clones across different parks in the United States. It is also considered an ACE landmark for its historical significance, which is the American coaster.
The
What is
American
the
Coaster Enthusiasts.
Thank you. So there's certain rides, if you go to parks, you might see a plaque that says that it's an ACE landmark. And basically, these are coasters that are recognized for their historical significance and the development of roller coasters. And
It's
so
not just some
obviously,
gimme award either. Like, these are
no.
major coasters in the coaster community, in the coaster world, that are either known to be innovative, important to a certain manufacturer's history, or just important to roller coaster development in general. Another really good example of an ACE historical landmark is Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, the coaster that started the Coaster Wars, the namesake of our podcast. And
Exactly.
so when you start talking about, a coaster being recognized by ACE, that's what we're comparing, Batman to, is like a
Yes.
coaster like Magnum XL. I'm trying to think of other ACE coasters that we have ridden. Can you think of any? Well, you
The
rode
Wizard.
the Wizard. Yeah, the Wizard's an ACE historical landmark. That's a Schwarzkopf, obviously.
Yep.
Oh, the Beast. Duh.
Oh.
Yeah, right.
Oh
That's
my
an
gosh,
ACE
yes.
historical landmark. The Loch Ness Monster out in Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. I rode that. That is an ACE historical landmark. So when we say that about a coaster, that is a huge designation for something of this.
Yes.
It's a huge thing to say that this is a historical landmark. And B&M has. I don't think that's their only one. I think they have a couple different ones, don't they? I'd have to look.
Oh, I would have to look it up. I just was
Yeah.
talking about Batman because that was really their standout first coaster.
No,
So
it was the coaster that put them on the map, basically.
it did, yes, very much so, making them a staple in roller coaster parks nowadays. I mean, you can't go to a park and not have a B&M there. And then, as talking about Batman specifically, that's a personal favorite of mine. Not only is it at mine and Gabe's home park, but I think I have to revamp my top 15 now that I've ridden Wildcat's Revenge, but I believe Batman is probably going to still sit on that list because of this nostalgia factor. And then I just love that ride. It's got amazing forces. I love the theming. I love the area that it was built in. And that ride, when it's running hot, runs fast. So it's a big ride, not only for B&M, but also a big ride for me. So but when we get further into this, so now that was their history, that was their beginnings. But nowadays, B&M, like I said, has become a staple across the roller coasting world. Over the years, they have built 128 roller coasters, 127 of which are still operating today. And in addition, they have several models. And honestly, saying that they don't innovate is not an accurate term, like Gabe was saying, because they're constantly coming up with new models. They
Even their new
currently
roller coasters are innovative in certain ways. Obviously, they still have I call them their one trick pony coasters, or a coaster that you can get from B&M and you're not going to get a bad ride. You know what I'm
no.
saying? But that's what B&M is
They
really good at, is just being
exactly.
consistently good. The other thing that I talk about a lot of times with B&M is that the coaster business is not for roller coaster enthusiasts. Let's be honest here. It's for the
No.
everyday park goer. They don't necessarily love the most intense, crazy, out of control experiences. They don't necessarily want to be thrown upside down like 17 different ways like an RMC would.
Yep.
They like consistency. They like, maybe something a little more gentle, a little more kid friendly, because let's be honest here, that's what a lot of amusement parks target, are family members
Oh
basically.
yeah.
And we, as a coaster enthusiast, we do have to kind of step back and remember the goal of the game is to get as many people to the amusement park. So they can't always cater to us as roller coaster enthusiasts, and that's something B&M is really, really good at, is kind of
Oh yeah.
balancing that. You know what I mean? But kind of
Oh yeah.
balancing that line of the GP as well as the coaster enthusiast.
Oh yeah, me and Gabe have said that before. We criticize them slightly because we talk about them being a little bit of a cookie cutter company nowadays. But I still believe that they are innovating because they're coming up with new types of coasters all the time. And then on top of that, like Gabe just said, it's really hard to find a bad B&M. You could find one that's maybe not as good as some of the other ones, but you still have fun and they're still generally a good coaster. So, and he's totally right. They're very much geared towards the general public. And when you get into what makes a B&M, you really see that. They have huge trains. That is like a staple of B&Ms is they're generally 4 people across and they're usually 6, 7, 8 rows. And then another thing we could talk about with B&Ms is those clamshell restraints, which are like some of the most comfortable restraints on the freaking planet.
Yes.
And then on
Yeah,
top
definitely.
of that, on top of that, they also make loading and unloading really, really fast, especially if they don't have a seatbelt. I mean, Raging Bull at Six Flags Great America, they have a timer in the station. The goal is to get that train out in 30 seconds. And I don't think that would even be feasible if they had seatbelts to contend with.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing with B&M is that that's what they design their coasters to do. The other thing is typically, like the B&M Hypers, they've run 3 trains.
Yes.
The B&M Inverts typically run 3 trains. The wing coasters can run 3 trains. So not only is it the capacity of each train, it's the fact that they can run it and construct a coaster with multiple block zones, mid-course brake run, and make a coaster that runs consistently and can get a lot of people through the line. That's why a lot of the GP loves B&Ms, because it's a 10-minute wait. It's a 15-minute wait. Even Raging Bull, very rarely do you see Raging Bull, the most popular coaster at Great America, over an hour long. And that's hard to say because like you go to Cedar Point, like Maverick, you can wait 2 hours for that. Millennium Force, you could wait 2.5 hours for it. Top Thrill, I can't even imagine what that line would look like when that reopens. It's going to be like a 3.5 hour wait. But you can walk down to Valraven, get on that in 25 minutes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or you can go walk over to Raptor at Cedar Point, get on that in 10 minutes. It's like, that's the one thing that a lot of the GP likes about B&M is that you don't necessarily have to wait 2 hours, 3 hours, 3.5 hours to get on one of the better rides in the park.
Absolutely. They are what we call capacity monsters, and they just eat through lines like nobody's business. Gabe mentioned a couple of them there in that little rant there that according to their website, B&M has quite a few different models that they produce. They have a wing coaster. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk. A wing coaster, a hyper coaster, a dive coaster, a flying coaster, a floorless coaster, an invert, a standing coaster, sitting coaster, and then a family coaster. Now, I wanted to ask you, Gabe, because don't they also have something called a surf coaster? And is that just a variation on the standing coaster?
Yeah, so basically the 2 biggest difference between the stand-up coaster and the quote-unquote surf coaster is the restraints are different. So they have a different style restraints. It's a little bit more free-moving restraint. But it also features LSM launch versus a lift hill. So that's kind of why they designated it a surf coaster instead of a stand-up coaster. Well, the other reason, too, is that some of the stand-up coasters from B&M do kind of have a little bit of a bad reputation. I'm not looking at you, Iron Wolf, but the other one that a lot of people talk about not enjoying is Green Lantern at Six Flags Great Adventure. I don't know if you remember riding that.
I do remember that because we rode it as the first coaster of the day, prepared for a terrible experience. We're like, let's just ride it and get it out of the way. And it was not that bad.
Pleasantly surprising. I really enjoyed that coaster. But that's my point. Even a quote-unquote bad B&M in Green Lantern really wasn't that bad. So,
no, it was not.
And that's their stand-up model. So I can give some examples here if you want of different models and stuff. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, since we got into it, we can start with the wing coaster.
Just name off a model and I can give you some examples if that's
okay. Start with the wing coaster.
Like so wing coaster, X-Flight, you got Gatekeeper at Cedar Point, you have Wild Eagle at Dollywood, there's one in Florida, I think, isn't there?
I think you're right. I don't know though.
No, there's
you know more of the parks than I do.
The wing coaster, there's not as many of those. The 3 big ones that I know are X-Flight, Gatekeeper, and Wild Eagle.
Yes. Well, and Gatekeeper, wing coasters are one of their newer models. I think the first one. So but I think of Gatekeeper. So our first experience with the Wayne coaster was X-Flight, because that's mine and Gabe's home park. Is just the most closest proximity. But when we talk about Gatekeeper is bigger than X-Flight, I believe. And it's got
Gatekeeper's really good. Gatekeeper is a really, really good coaster. It is a coaster that gets absolutely buried at Cedar Point, but it's at the front of the park. It has some really cool inversions. I love the zero-G rolls over the midway. Like, it is a very good coaster, and it does not get talked about enough. That's for sure.
If you go to mine and Gabe's, I believe it's episode, God, I don't remember. I just remember that it's our Cedar Point special, because mine and Gabe coincidentally had Maverick at the same spot in our top 15s.
Yes.
So if you go back there, you can hear us talk about Gatekeeper, and what Gabe described it as is it really mimics the feeling of actually flying. Like, it's so smooth, and just the way it moves you through the air and the way it twists so just, I'm trying to think of the word, elegantly, and it really gives you the feeling of flying, which is absolutely amazing to do on a coaster.
Oh, the other one. I know what the one I was looking for. Thunderbird at Holiday World is a B&M launched wing coaster. That's the one I was looking for in my brain. That's actually in Indiana, not Florida, though. I don't know where I got Florida from, but
who knows?
Yes.
You went to a lot of parks down there, but all right. Next one, the tried and true bread and butter of the B&M world, the Hyper.
Oh, I can go. This is a long list. Obviously, Raging Bull, Diamondback, Candemonium, Nitro, Mako. That's one in Florida. You got, is it Titan? No, that's a Gianova. Trying to think. There's one in Texas. No, that's a Gianova Nova.
What's the one with the splashdown?
That's Diamondback.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I was waiting for you to say that, but then you weren't saying it.
I was going to start listing off Gigas too, and I kind of...
okay.
It's weird that they don't list Giga on their website, though. Isn't that funny?
It is, yeah. Well, Gigas are really similar to the Hyper model. Yeah, they're just 300 instead of 200.
Some of the Gigas, there's Leviathan, that's up in Canada. You got Orion, which is the one at Kings Island. You have, obviously, my favorite to B&M of all time, Fury 325. That's at Carowinds. Oh, Intimidator. That's another one at Carowinds. That's a B&M Hyper. So the Hypers and the Gigas run really similar. The biggest difference is obviously Gigas over 300 feet. However, the one asterisk is Fury does not feel like a Hyper. Fury's kind of its own thing from B&M. It is classified as a Giga. It doesn't have any inversions, but it does not run the same. And that's why it's probably my favorite, but
Fury is the example of B&M is a general public ride and Fury is not.
Fury that's the one 325 truly is more towards the enthusiasts. It's kind of like B&M and Intamin had a baby and like Fury 325 popped out. Like
yes. Again, that I think is number 3 on Gabe's list. So if you go back to episode 12, I think it is 12 or 13 would be Gabe's Fury 325 episode.
Very good coaster. And I rode it when it was 40 degrees out. I didn't even get to ride it when it was like warm out, and it's still number 3. So that should really tell you something there.
Yes. All right.
Moving on.
Yes. On to our next category of dive coasters.
Dive coasters. So the big one is Valraven at Cedar Point, obviously 200 and some feet. You have Shurika at Six Flags, that's actually Busch Gardens. Shurika is Busch Gardens. Then you have the mini dive coaster at Six Flags over Texas, Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger. They built a brand new one up at Dorney Park. I can't think of the name of it, but it's steampunk themed. I know that. I can't tell you the name.
Oh, I feel like
it's brand new. They just built it this year. That's another.
I was going to say that's their newest coaster, and I thought I put that in my notes somewhere, but now I don't see it. So.
I can't think of the name of it, but I know they just built it. So those are good examples of the dive coasters. A dive coaster is the coasters that basically lift you up.
It's Iron Menace, Gabe. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yep. Was I right? Dorney Park?
Yep, Dorney Park and Wildwater Kingdom in Dorneyville, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Anyway, those are the ones that use the chain to kind of pause as you're like staring directly at the ground. Most of them have a vertical drop or slightly beyond vertical drop.
It's one of the most terrifying experiences on the planet for someone who does not like heights. The front row is the worst.
That's one of the coaster models I say is kind of a one-trick pony, but it is a very good one trick. I will say that. But after the drops, a lot of people complain they're not very entertaining. However, Valraven, I would disagree with that a little bit. I feel like that layout's kind of entertaining for a dive coaster.
Yeah.
But anyway,
all right, on to our next category is the flying coasters.
The flying coasters. So the Superman clones. Obviously, that's the big one. You have is it the Stingray or there's one in Florida at...
I think it's the Manta Ray.
Manta Ray, that's it. Actually, I think that's is it California or Florida? I don't remember.
It's Florida.
Is it Florida?
It's at SeaWorld in Florida because they were building
SeaWorld,
it when we went there when we were kids, and I wanted to ride it so bad. They were building it.
The other big flyer, Tatsu, over at Six Flags Magic Mountain. I need to get on that coaster. But the flying coasters are known for the very intense pretzel loop inversion where you pull like 4.5 Gs as you're laying on your back.
Holy hell.
Really good coasters, but the Superman clones are kind of like the prototype, so they're not the greatest, and that's the only ones we've ridden of the flying coasters. We really need to get on Tatsu and Manta Ray because those two are supposed to be really, really good. There's one over in Europe too, I think, that's at a Universal Park. I can't think of the name of it, but it's supposed to be really good as well. So
okay, yeah, with the flying coasters, I just always feel like they're not the most intense things on the planet. And they are fun to ride though, because it is in a completely different seated position than anything you've ever ridden. And then I do enjoy that a lot of the times. So when you get into this coaster, it actually looks, when you're in the station, it kind of initially looks like a normal invert. So you get into the seats, but then the seats lift up to get you into that quote unquote flying position. And every single time, it never fails, there is someone who screams. And it terrifies them for some reason, and I find it hilarious.
Yes, for sure. Okay, moving on to the next one.
The floorless models.
The floorless models. So actually, I'm going to take the next 3 models and group them all together. So you have the floorless, the sitting, and the stand-up. Now, the reason I group these coasters together is because they all really do the same thing. Inversions, intensity, helixes, corkscrews, stuff like that. It's just the different style trains. So you can have just the normal sit-down trains where you just literally sit in a train and it goes. Then you have the floorless models where you sit down, but then the floor, like once they put you in your restraints and strap you all down, then the floor goes away and you can just see track in front of you if you're in the front row. And then obviously the stand-up model where you just stand up. But again, like I said, I loop them all together because they all feel really similar. If you've ridden a stand-up, you've ridden a sit-down. If you've ridden a sit-down, you've ridden a floorless. The biggest difference is obviously just the trains. But that's where you'll see inversions where you have the vertical loops, you have the implement loops, you have the inclined loops, you have cobra rolls, you have corkscrews, you have zero-G roll, which is a B&M hallmark. Nobody else can even touch B&M zero-G rolls. I don't know what it is. I don't know how they do it. Not even RMC. RMC cannot even do a zero-G roll as well as B&M. And I don't get it. I don't know why, but they're just so good. I love them. One of my favorites of these coasters is the Superman Krypton coaster down at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. That is a floorless, and that is a very, very good ride. Another really good one would be the stand-up at Cedar Point, Rougarou, which actually got converted. I think it's a sit-down now. I think it used to be a stand-up, but now it's a sit-down.
Okay.
I don't know. Very underrated coaster. Another one that gets buried at Cedar Point. Cedar Point has a lot of B&Ms. So the B&Ms at Cedar Point, you have Raptor, you have Valraven, you have Rougarou, and you have Gatekeeper. So they have 4 of them there. The problem is they just get kind of overshadowed by some of the more record-breaking coasters at that park. Yes. Obviously, Steel Vengeance, Top Thrill, Millennium Force, Maverick, Magnum XL 200, because I absolutely love that coaster. Side note, there is a cult following for Magnum XL 200, and I'm a part of it. Just an FYI there. But yeah, so anyway, the floorless, the stand-up, and the sit-down are kind of all the same. They just have different trains.
Okay. And then we could do our last two categories are the inverts and then the family coasters. I didn't know if you knew anything about the family coasters. I didn't really know anything about
the family
those.
coasters are basically just an invert that doesn't have any inversions. They have a little slightly different trains. They're only sit too wide. It's basically really similar to like the Vekoma inverted family coaster. It's just a B&M, basically. We rode, do you remember Dragon, what the hell is it called? The one in Dollywood we rode. Dragonflyer. That is a Vekoma family suspended coaster. So the B&M family coaster is really similar to that. It's just obviously B&M, not Vekoma.
Okay.
And but then the invert model, obviously coasters like the Batman clones, you have Alpine Geist down in Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, you have Raptor at Cedar Point, you have my favorite invert, which is
I was just about to say
Montu down at Busch Gardens, Tampa. That is a very, very good invert. That is a hard one to beat. Another example would be Afterburn at Carowinds. You have a Batman clone up at Great Adventure. You have this
Great Bear at Hershey Park.
Great Bear at Hershey Park. That's a weird one. That's a weird coaster.
It is.
That has got to be the weirdest B&M out there, honestly. Like, that is just a strange experience.
It definitely 100% is. So totally agree with you on that.
But the invert model. Here's a good example of the invert model that is a favorite coaster of yours. Do you know what I'm going to say? Guess. You know this one. Come on. You know this one.
Wait, so it's a B&M invert and well, obviously, if it's a favorite of mine.
I'll give you a hint. You've ridden both of them.
What?
At the same park, Florida. You've ridden both of them. It's no longer there. Come on. You know the answer to this.
Dueling Dragons. Yes. My God.
Dueling Dragons at Universal. Those were B&M inverts.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah. When B&M in the 90s and early 2000s, when they were building their inverts and hypers, man, they were like popping off.
Yes, they were.
Raging Bull, Diamondback, Nitro, Montu, Raptor, the Batman clones. Like, those are some really, really, really good coasters built in the 90s by B&M or early 2000s.
Yes. So that is the coaster lineup when it comes to B&M. So now we can kind of get into what makes a B&M a B&M. And I kind of was trying to look up like what are some of the signatures, and we kind of talked about some of them. One of them is those clamshell restraints that are
yes. Oh my God. The clamshell B&M restraints are absolutely the best restraints in the business. But when you put them on a coaster like Fury 325, they're like dangerously good. And what I mean by that is you seriously feel like you're going to fly out of the damn thing. Like, they're so, and maybe as a GP, you might not like that so much, but they are a very nice restraint. You can get some really good airtime space in there and really feel the forces of a coaster. And they're just a really, really good restraint.
100%. And they're so easy and quick to get in and out of. And as Gabe said, I remember when we ride Raging Bull, you like press on the ground and put your knees up so you don't get that last click that you really should.
We don't do that. We don't do that. That's
we may or may not.
We do not do that. No.
Facts are not confirmed.
Disclaimer, do not do this.
Exactly. But it just, as me and Gabe have talked about with some of the woodies that we ride, it makes you feel very open and out in the middle of the air, and it gives you great floater airtime, which is what a B&M Hyper specifically is all about, is that floater airtime. So it just gives you a really great experience.
Sustained floater airtime. That's the one thing we do talk about with the B&M, especially like a Diamondback or a Raging Bull. It is multiple seconds of feeling like weightlessness where, like some like the woody coasters out there, you might get a pop of it, especially like a Mystic Timbers. You get a pop of airtime, It's half a second here, which is really fun and exciting. But when you get 4-5 seconds of sustained floater airtime where you're just kind of like weightlessness, feeling like you're floating around in space, that is and that's what a B&M Hyper or a Giga does really, really well, is floater airtime. And I know, everybody's like, oh, I want ejector, I want to be thrown out of my seat. Yeah, I do, but sometimes that hurts, man. Like, let's be honest here.
Yes.
Like, a B&M Hyper is just so smooth, so enjoyable, and it's re-rideable. If you really like the layout and the moments on that coaster, you can ride it 6, 7, 8, 9 times and get off and still just feel so good. Where like if you go to ride like a RMC Goliath or Outlaw Run, you get off that thing, you're a little beat up. Let's be honest here.
Oh yeah, it's what? It's funny because B&M's kind of got the both sides of the spectrum there. Because if we ride an invert, I usually need a minute. Inverts are their intensity machines. They are trying to get as much force. Yeah,
it's the pacing too. And the G-forces and the repetitive G-forces.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So when we ride a B&M invert, I mean, you got to take a break. You need a second to readjust your brain after something like that. I get dizzy on them. That's my thing, is I get so dizzy on B&M inverts.
I just remember getting off the Batman clone at Six Flags Great Adventure. Now, little asterisk here, it was like 98 degrees out, but that thing was flying, and we got off, like we had to like hold the railing and be like, okay, hold on a second, I gotta sit here and just kind of regain my bearings a little bit. But that's a really good example. Montu is like that. You get off that thing and you just like, okay, hold on a second, let's just let's just hang out.
Yes. Well, and we talk about, so another caveat with the Batman clones is me and Gabe have ridden a couple different ones, and we always said that none of them were as good as the original. And part of that is just the terrain with which the original Batman was built in. It was built for the spot that it was built in. And so the clones are literally just picked up and then put wherever they're put. And so you don't realize how much terrain interaction the original Batman has until you get on a clone that doesn't have any, and you're like, wow, that was not as good. The one at Great Adventure, like Gabe said, we got off that thing and we're like, holy cow, I don't know what the heck, they must have greased the wheels before we went on or something. And it was running so intensely. We're like, all right, that we might have found a clone that's just as good as the original.
Yeah, that one was rolling that day when we rode it.
Yes, it was.
Yes. Another really, really good B&M invert, Alpine Geist. I don't know. A lot of people really hyped that coaster up, the one at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. I don't know if I just got a bad ride on it or if it was just not doing well that day. I just really wasn't that impressed with it. Now, when you talk about like a Montu or even a Raptor, I love Raptor. Cedar Point, I don't know about you, but that is a really, really good coaster.
Well, and it's nice too because that's not a Batman clone. That's original layout.
Not. And that's a really, really good ride experience and a very intense ride experience.
Yes.
That's the other thing. People say, oh, B&Ms, they're forceless. Not really. I don't know what coasters you're riding, but...
Right? I mean, even if we talk about like some of the hypers out there, I mean, we talk about Raging Bull and it has really great floater airtime, but then it has that helix section that freaking
that
pounds
pulls some
you
forces.
into your seat.
Yeah, that definitely pulls. We got to talk about the B&M Hyper situation because I did a YouTube video on this and I got several comments. Now, obviously my YouTube channel no longer exists, but when I said Raging Bull is the best B&M Hyper out there, I got a lot of hate for it, but I don't think a lot of you have experienced it. Or you just didn't experience it in the back row. I will say that. Now, if you experience it in the front row, it's just not as good. It's just not as good. But Raging Bull has the best first drop on a B&M Hyper and a Giga, in my opinion. It has the most diverse layout of any B&M Hyper. It has the most G-forces of any B&M Hyper. And it has some really, really good airtime moments. And it is the best B&M Hyper in my opinion. I rode Diamondback. I just didn't think it was as good. Now, here's the other thing, though. Diamondback was really close. Okay, I think a lot of people don't realize how much I love Diamondback. And it is a very, very good coaster. It just wasn't Raging Bull. And the reason I love Raging Bull so much is the same reason you do. It's because it's more unique. It has a different style layout than a traditional out and back B&M Hyper. And it crosses over itself a lot more, and it just has a lot more uniqueness to it. But that being said, it is one of the best B&Ms out there.
Yes. So since we've been talking about some of the older coasters that B&M has produced, there's something that me and Gabe mentioned in a previous episode, and I asked why they did this, and I did not have an answer, and Gabe did not have an answer, so I found the answer. And I'm talking about the B&M pre-drop that is found on their... Well, it's a staple of their older roller coasters, and I was like, and we're like, we don't know why, but all of their, the ones that have a pre-drop always have a better drop. It's for whatever reason. Now, come to find out, it has nothing to do with the ride experience as to why they put them in. I don't know if it's just maybe because it's on their older B&Ms, and older B&Ms tend to be a little bit better than their newer ones, if that's why it makes the drop quote unquote better. But the real reason that they have the pre-drop is from an engineering standpoint. It was designed to take stress off the lift chain at the very top of the hill. Basically, that little pre-drop section acts as a platform to hold the weight of the train until the whole thing is pushed over. And the reason that you don't see it on new B&Ms is because nowadays what they do to instead of that, like needing that platform for the train to sit on, they just speed up the train at the top and kind of shoot you over to relieve that stress on the train.
Yeah, it's definitely something you notice, especially like on a Raging Bull or a Batman or a Raptor. A good example of a new B&M would be Banshee. That is an invert at Kings Island. Another really, really good coaster. I can't believe we haven't mentioned that one yet. This goes to show how many good B&Ms are out there. That does not have a pre-drop, but that's one of the newest inverts out there. I think that one was constructed in 2012. I'm guessing. That's a guess. Let's talk about some of the newer B&Ms. Banshee is one of them. Fury 325, that's 2013. I'm guessing. You have Gatekeeper, that's a newer one. A lot of the wing coasters are newer. You have obviously Iron Menace. They just built that out at Dorney Park. Some really good rides, but Fury 325 is what a new B&M can really be, and that's another really, really good coaster. You need to ride that thing, Sam.
I know I need to ride that thing.
We need a trip. We just need like 3 months off. We just need to take a whole summer and just...
I'll start saving, I guess.
I need to get to Hershey Park. You need to get to Carowinds. We need to go back to Florida.
I'll start saving money. I'll get us a bank account, and then we can go in your camper and we'll just camp.
Oh, okay. Yes, totally. Okay. Little side note, we do have another trip, hopefully tentatively planned. Yes. But we'll talk about that more maybe at the end of the episode. But
but yeah, even the new ones I think are just as good as the old ones. I think it's just obviously there's more old ones than there are new ones. Yes. And with Fury 325, like, I don't know the circumstances under which it was built, but it was probably, I almost wonder if the park was like, we'll do whatever you want. We just want a giga.
Pretty much. Well, that had to have been a request from Carowinds to get that coaster. Okay. There's no way B&M would be like, here you go. You know what I mean? And that's just not who they are. Yeah. But, all right. So what's your favorite B&M? Pick one. What's the best?
I have to pick one?
You have to pick one.
Raging Bull. It just is.
The Raging Bull? Yes.
Yep.
Tell us why. Why is it the best?
So I love airtime. I love floater airtime. And so Raging Bull does that really, really well. And then as Gabe said, it has a unique layout. It was, again, built for this. It was designed for the space that it was built in. And so they couldn't physically do an out and back layout, so they were forced to do something else. And then being an early B&M, it's still glass smooth. There is no shakiness on that ride at all. Being at a Six Flags park, I know they don't have the greatest ride ops in the world, but they also know that Raging Bull is their best ride and most popular ride. So, and I wouldn't say best ride, I'd say most popular ride. And so they know to keep their best team on it. So I think it has really great energy on it. And a lot of people, like I had a contract in Wisconsin. And so like every time I met someone, I was like, hey, what's your favorite roller coaster? 99% of the time it was Raging Bull. But you know, the other 10%, you want to know what their other favorite ride was? Gabe, you want to take a guess?
American Eagle?
Batman.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Another B&M.
Yep, exactly. So it just, I really do love the inverts and I love the theming that's on Batman, but I like floater airtime more than I like G-Forces. Gabe is our G-Force man, so Raging Bull is my favorite.
Okay, all right. Let's just start off by saying this. Raging Bull is in my top 10, top 15. Diamondback is in my top 15. Montu is in my top 15. That being said, in fact, Montu's up there. Montu is really close. I really, really, really loved that ride experience. However, obviously, Fury 325 being number 3 overall on my list.
Yes.
It's hard to beat Fury 325, and that really comes down to it. Number 1, 325-foot drop. Still not as good as I don't know what it is about Raging Bull's first drop. I don't know if it's just a longer train or what, but really good first drop on Fury. Still not as good as Raging Bull. However, the rest of the ride experience is better. The thing that Fury 325 does really well is diversifying its airtime with laterals. And that's something that no other B&M can really say is you get a really good dose of floater airtime as well as like a twisting lateral motion. And then the other thing about Fury 325 is it carries its speed really well through the layout, a top speed of over 90 miles per hour. And
I forgot about that.
A majority of that ride, you are doing pretty close to that number. There's only really one element or two elements that gives you way above the ground. That's obviously the first overbanked turn, and then the treble clef element halfway through. The rest of the elements, the airtime hills and the twisted airtime hills, are a lot closer to the ground. So it carries its speed really well through the entire layout. And you're also talking about over 6,000 feet of track. It's a very long layout. It's hard to beat Fury 325. And like I said, it doesn't feel like a normal B&M. And I rode it when it was 40 degrees out. That still blows me away. It was 41 degrees out. At 40 degrees, they shut the coaster down. It can't run. So I was literally riding it like in its worst state, and it's still number 3 on my top 15 and number 3.
You even have full train?
Oh yeah, we had full train. There were only running one train when I was there because it was in between their Thanksgiving and their Christmas event. So there was literally like 30 people in the park. I got like 25 rides on it. That's probably another reason why I love it. Because I did get a lot of ride experience on it. But it's not a traditional B&M. But again, going back to what we said at the very beginning of the episode about how a lot of people say B&M isn't innovative, you can't get on a ride like Fury 325 and tell me they're not innovative.
No.
Like, that's not even something Intamin would really do. Obviously, now new Intamin would.
Oh, Gabe, I lost you. Sorry. You cut out. I don't know what you're saying.
Technical difficulties.
You were just making your point about how you can't ride Fury 325 and say that the B&M's not innovative. And
you can't. And here's the other thing too with that is, like I said, Intamin has hypercoasters, but they really didn't start diving into it until recently, other than Sky Rush, of course. But I just feel, like I said, you can't ride a Fury 325 and tell me that's not innovative in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, yeah.
So that's definitely my favorite coaster from them.
We like to talk about innovation in the roller coaster world, and we like to talk about the newest and greatest thing. But in reality, you also have to think about it. They're still technically a company, a business that needs to make money. Yes. And so B&M has found their niche. They have found what they're good at. And as we've said multiple times, is you cannot go to a park and have only one B&M there. There are multiple B&Ms at practically every park, especially the big parks. I mean, we talked about Cedar Point, and did you say they have like 4 of them there?
Yeah, they do. Well, even look at Great Adventure. Half the coasters at Great Adventure are freaking B&Ms.
Exactly. So it's like it would be lovely if they could just get a blank checkbook and be like, hey, do whatever the hell you want. But unfortunately, a business doesn't run like that.
No, and
So
Fury 325 kind of was that, though. Like, basically,
yeah,
build us a Giga Coaster that's better than most hypers, and they did that.
exactly.
So, with that, though, I think we kind of wrapped up everything we can say about B&M. Innovative, yes. Conservative, kind of, but a really good ride manufacturing. One of our favorites. Let's be honest here.
Yes.
Let's be honest. So definitely we're gonna do some more of these episodes. I want to do one on Intamin. I did one on my YouTube channel, so I can just kind of reiterate basically what I said there. We also have to do Arrow, I think. That's definitely.
Well, of course.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many and then of course we have to do RMC because RMC is like
yes.
the. So, well, in RMC, I mean, they're all unique, actually, because, I mean, Arrow is one of the first companies out there. Intimate just does whatever the hell they want. RMC is doing something completely different. So, I don't think we're going to do them back to back, obviously.
No. Well, our next special episode is a very special.
I'm so excited.
Oh my god, that is going to end up being like a 2-hour long episode by the time.
The drama.
Oh my god. We are going to be talking about the redheaded stepchild of the roller coaster industry. RCCA, Roller Coasters of America, something like that. Or Roller Coaster Corporation of America is what it stands for.
Okay.
And how basically they were the con man of the roller coaster world.
Oh gosh.
How they managed to build 2 different roller coasters, it blows my. I mean, they actually built like 4, but like the 2 big ones are Son of Beast and the Rattler. I don't know how the Rattler exists, and then you go back to RCCA and say, "Can you build us something even bigger?" Like, I don't understand the thought process there. But we got to talk about, just because we were talking about, B&M hyper coasters, Son of Beast, the only hyper wooden coaster.
That's a very good point. I forgot about that.
Also, we have our next episode, non-B&M hypers, which this goes to show you something about B&M, though. I did want to mention this. I have not ridden a non-B&M hyper coaster, so I had to go overseas and steal one from them because I haven't experienced one. And it's kind of another bucket list coaster moment. Sam's, though, she has a really good coaster to bring to that battle as well, obviously.
I'm excited.
Yes.
This is going to be a fun episode. And Gabe made a very good point there, is that a hypercoaster is really a staple of the B&M's kind of arsenal, and it was hard to find one.
Yes.
Basically what this was is I have a ride and I wanted to talk about it, so I came up with a very arbitrary category, and Gabe went, oh crap, I gotta figure something out for this.
But we haven't plugged this episode yet. Another very, 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 very fun episode. The Nostalgia Factor episode.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I don't know how we have not mentioned this episode yet. This is going to come after the non-B&M Hypers episode, and it is going to be a very, very fun, a very, very throwback, kind of low-key episode. 2 very good coasters.
Yes.
And oh my 2 gosh, coasters at the opposite ends of the spectrum as well. Like one massive crazy roller coaster at a massive crazy park, and then a little baby coaster at a little baby park.
You don't even have to buy tickets to get into your roller coaster's park. You literally just buy tickets to ride the.
It's $1, I think, and you can get on it.
Yep. So. Yeah, but with that, thank you everybody for listening to the podcast. As always, you can find us on almost all the socials. I'm on Facebook, we are on Twitter, and we are also on Instagram. We post there updates on what episodes are coming out. And then, as Gabe said, when we finally get around to taking our trips, I will be posting information there about what parks we're going to. And then,
do we want to talk about that a little bit, or is that still too far out?
I think it's still too far out, and we haven't really ironed out when we're going.
Well, I'm going either way, so you just got to figure out whether you're going or not.
That's a very good point. I mean, why don't we do that here? So me and Gabe are planning our roller coaster trip this year, and it's going to be a big one. We're hitting 3 different parks. So why don't you tell us about it?
3 very small parks. However, this is going to be the trip of the wooden roller coasters. We're looking at potentially a top 10, actually 2 top 10 wooden roller coasters, like seriously good rides, as well as some other kind of bucket list little niche rides that I've been wanting to get on, as well as a very, very fun B&M coaster. Hey, look at that. We came full circle.
Yep.
So that is going to be a great trip. 3 parks, 5 days, a lot of driving.
Yeah, but we're Midwesterners. It's fine.
The strange thing about the trip is that 2 of the parks people probably have never heard of.
Yeah.
And 1 park is a very obscure park that only has really 1 coaster that people know about. So that's going to be a fun trip. That's going to be a very fun trip. We're also trying really, really hard to make it out to Magic Mountain at some point. I really want to get out there. I got to ride some of those coasters. That is a very expensive trip, though, and I don't want to go to California when it's 110 degrees out. I'm sorry, I'm just not doing it. So
yeah, we'll have to plan that for maybe later in the season or something. That would be nice,
like a September trip or something like that.
Yes,
and we're also looking at doing some trips for new coasters next year. At some point, we got to get on the new Top Thrill. That's probably not going to happen this year, though, unfortunately.
No.
We want to try and make it to Epic Universe. That's a year out, though.
Yes.
That is going to be a really fun trip if we could get that.
Yes.
If we could get that like on opening day, that would be like hallelujah moment.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We'll have to keep our eyes peeled for when they're announcing.
Listen to our podcast so we can spend money.
Right? We need the money to go ride more coasters for you guys.
Yes, fund us broke working people to go ride coasters.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing. So but with that, thank you everybody for listening, and join us next week for our non-B&M Hypers episode.
Bye-bye.